Welcome to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales, where today's conversation dives deep into the strategic art of scaling your sales team the smart way, not just the fast way. Sean, Kevin, and returning guest Steve Caton reveal how fractional sales talent can reduce risk while building a foundation for sustainable revenue generation. You'll hear why focusing on leading indicators, not just closed deals, can transform your sales management decisions and accelerate predictable growth. If you're trying to decide when to hire, how to expand, or how to build a system that scales, this episode is your roadmap.
Welcome back to Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. This is Sean O'Shaughnessy, and today we're going to talk about scales, and not the kind of scales that you do for piano, and definitely not the kind of scales that you sit on or stand on, because if you know me, I don't want to be looking at that scale thing. But we're going to talk about scaling and the ability to figure out how are you going to scale your organization. We are lucky today to have a repeat visitor. This is the first time we've had a guest come on where the guest was on before. We took a couple months off between the sessions, and now we've got Steve Caton coming back to us. Steve is the CEO from Altezza Solutions, a fractional sales organization. He did a great job a couple months ago for us, and we are pleased to have you back on board. Steve, thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Good to be back. And yeah, honored that you invited me back, because that's not a given, right? You said it's the first time, so I feel privileged.
Thank you very much. Yeah. And Kevin, so what do you think about scalability? Let's talk a little bit about scalability. You and I have talked about it a lot. What do you think about this, and how can we set Steve up to talk to us about, give us some wisdom here?
I think the wisdom is going to flow from Steve directly, but when I think about scale, I think about it in two buckets: 0 to 1 and 1 to 100. And you and I have talked at length before, Sean, about the 0 to 1 paradigm shifts that business owners and sales leaders have about how to get that first good hire so that you can scale like up and to the right. Think hockey stick versus gradual. And Steve, I'm real interested in what you're thinking through right now as a not only a paradigm shift, but a methodology or method of operations for how you interact with a ton of businesses with your practice and how you're helping them scale. So you've got the real user forward-facing, CEO-facing content. So bring us up to speed in your world.
I think it's such a relevant conversation because we're all trying to figure out how to grow right now, and being adaptable is a super important thing right now. One of the things that we talked about last time in that 0 to 1 conversation is that the reason it's so hard to do that is because that first salesperson that you bring in doesn't have any kind of sales foundation to operate in. There's no sales operating system, so they can't accurately predict how much money they're going to make and how many sales they're going to make. So getting that first salesperson in there through the fractional model, using you guys to build the foundation, and then potentially somebody from Altezza or another person part-time to execute, is the bullets before cannonballs approach to building the foundation that will then support scale. So what we always talk about is, hey, start small and then see what works and then expand once you learn, right? And if you can do that cost effectively using fractional sales leadership that you guys bring, and then we couple that with fractional salespeople, then we can learn with a smaller investment, smaller sample size, and then build that foundation that's going to help us scale as we grow and add more people when it makes sense. That's, I think, a really good example of being adaptable. It allows you to do what you got to do without spending a crazy amount of money to do it.
So what do you think about the challenge, though, of trying to cover a region, a country, a continent, for those people who are selling to all of North America? Or maybe they're just a local company and their business, their territory is just the city that they're in. The city of, you're in Atlanta, we're in Cincinnati, but the city that you're in, and that's really your market, versus a company that maybe is trying to sell in a tri-state region or half the country, or maybe the entire continent, though, North America. What do you think are the challenges, and how do you suggest that a client solve that problem when they started with one? Because one means I get the world.
Yeah, you're talking about with one salesperson?
Yeah. And when's it time to go to 2? When's it time to go to 5?
There's a couple of different directions we could go here. And one would be, using the fractional model as context, and one would be using my experience leading sales teams in the past as context. So tell me which one would be most helpful as you think about the audience.
I'd love to say all of the above, but we're going to run out of time because
Yeah.
we only have about 10 more minutes here. So let's do the fractional sales model just to help reinforce that, because that'll be a learning experience for people also if they're not familiar with that model.
The way we look at it through the Altezza lens is we've got these different hourly kind of buckets that people can buy, starting at 30, going to 60 hours a month. We'll look at it monthly. Many times we have people that want to go take that one salesperson that's doing 60 hours a month and say, let's go to 80, let's go to 100. And we always say, we're not going to go beyond 60 hours a month with one, because if you want to go to 80, let's do two at 40 instead. And the reason why is because now you get competitive juices flowing, right? You got two salespeople working, even if it's two different territories, but now you've got that fun, competitive kind of energy that begins to flow. And so that's how we determine it that way. So that usually that scale conversation is determined by capacity that first salesperson is creating. And if they're growing the territory and sales are growing, typically the business owners, let's get more. And then we just say, hey, when we get to that break point of 60 to 80, let's do two. So that's how we look at it through the lens of what we're doing at Altezza.
Using that same lens, that same framework for the CEO, how are they measuring it? Because it's not just in hours. You're not
Correct.
trading hours for dollars
Correct.
when you're scaling a business. You're trading results for time and systems.
Correct.
So let's talk through how a CEO listening to this can frame up their next growth step, their scale step with your model, because I think that's a really useful piece of understanding how it is you work.
Yeah, I'll share my perspective. I can't wait to hear what you guys think about it. We always talk about leading indicators and lagging indicators. And so leading indicators is all about activity. So in the bucket of time that the sales pro is giving you each week, how many calls are they making? How many meetings are they having? How many emails are they sending out? How many proposals are going out? How many deals are being created in the sales funnel? So these are all examples of leading indicators that will then ultimately lead to the lagging indicators that we're looking for, which are deals closed, revenue in the door, that kind of thing. So what we're always trying to pay attention to is, are we getting the appropriate amount of activity, the leading indicators, within the hours that the salesperson is working, right? And that's a full-time conversation and a part-time conversation, because a lot of times I've had full-time salespeople, for whatever reason, they're not getting the activity they need to. So what's going on there? Let's look at that. So I think for a business owner, we always tell them, hey, you're tempted to always just pay attention to closings, but you got to be paying attention to all those leading indicators first, because the closings are going to be an outcome of that.
Absolutely. We all know that sales is a bit of a number game. We can have account-based marketing to really be focused on certain accounts, or we can have territory-based marketing systems that people like Amy Connor would put together. Amy was a guest for us on one of our earlier episodes. But the reality is, if you're not working, if there's zero effort, then you're not going to have any results. And you have to do better than that. And they have to do significantly better than that, because sales is about finding the customer that is going to buy, that is ready to buy. That's not just a marketing thing. That's a sales thing. Because even if it's a marketing lead that somebody filled out a form on a website, you still got to find the right person, because probably the right person didn't fill out the form on the website at the customer. And I'm not saying anything bad about that person. It's the junior person, though, was told, go out and find out all the information on this technology from 5 different companies. Well, that's a valuable thing in the business decision-making process, but that doesn't mean that person that's doing that research is really the person that we're going to be selling to. So on that vein, how do we know that, okay, we are doing well, we have one person, he's hunking along? How do we know that it is time to, in your case, maybe take him from 40 hours up to 60 hours, or maybe it is time to do another territory or split the territory in half? How do we do that? And then what are the challenges, both from Altezza's standpoint, as well as your history of being a sales manager before you started Altezza, of, hey, let's do it so that the first person doesn't get upset that they just lost half their territory?
Yeah. And I think this conversation has got a lot of nuance to it, right? So it's tempting to try to oversimplify it, but I think that would be doing the audience a disservice if we did that. So when you think about time to scale, when I think about it through the lens of both Altezza and previous leadership, I had to always think about what specific role is the salesperson playing. So are they more of a top of funnel person, or are they more mid to bottom of the funnel? So are they a closer or are they a prospector? Because there's different metrics you're looking at in both of those situations, right? So if I'm creating the leads and qualifying the leads to send to the closers, then I got to be, how many leads do I need from that one prospector to feed the closers? And then basically once they've maxed out, then it's time to bring on another one. And then for the closers, I got to look at those activities we talked about before, but I also have to think about my sales cycle, right? Because you could have a really complex sales process where one closer might not be able to do a lot of activity per day because the meetings that they're having are really long and drawn out, and there's lots of stakeholders. So you have to take all of that into consideration. But just to roll it up, bottom line, whenever I had people that were doing both prospecting and closing, I always wanted to add new salespeople when the closers I had didn't have to hunt anymore. I was like, time to get new salespeople because I want them to stay hungry. I wanted them to keep hunting. So that's when I would bring in another salesperson so that the people I had couldn't just live off the leads that were being created by the marketing team.
Absolutely. And to think about that, to relate that to other real world businesses is when the book of business, when the residual gets a salesperson comfortable, then it's time to keep hunting. So let's do a quick rapid fire on dispelling rumors about fractional sellers. Because Steve, what you've got here is you've got a great model, but there's somebody out there thinking, can they do it for my business? So engineering, professional service, manufactured products, promotional items, software, all those different industries have unique pieces about them. Let's give somebody the 30-second pitch on how we take difficult, high subject matter integrity industries and relate a process to them. And then maybe Sean will wrap us up with how that flows into a sales process.
So how does a fractional salesperson address those more complex markets?
Adapt and sell through. Yep.
Yeah. One of the things that is at least true in our world at Altezza is that our salespeople have got at least 10 to 15 years of experience. So you're not dealing with newbies, right? You're dealing with people who know how to sell. They've been selling for a long time. They understand sophistication needed to sell those more complex products and services. You just have to teach them how to apply that skill into the unique product or service that you're selling. So the adaptability is already there because they've had a lot of at-bats. Now it's let's plug and play into this new product or service that they're selling.
That's great. Thank you very much. And I appreciate that. I've had experience on that same topic that you just talked about of bringing in a sales pro. It's fantastic because now I don't have to teach the basics of selling. And not that I'm against doing that. And I'm not against having young salespeople on my teams, but it is nice to have the sales pro. So let's talk about the process, the sales process. What I have seen, and I'd really like your opinion on this, is that sales pros tend to be more, and actually more sophisticated, more experienced salespeople tend to have a sales process as opposed to just winging it for every single deal that they work on. Mm-hmm. What do you teach your sales pros? How do you react to that? And what advice do you give to your clients that maybe they don't have a Kevin or me working for them?
Yeah, I'll start with the last question first, because what we've always said is that process comes before people. So if you're a business owner and you want to create sustainable, scalable, predictable sales, build the process first and then find people to plug into it. Because if you bring a salesperson in and there's no process, guess what they're going to do? They're going to be trying to figure out how to build a process for themselves because, like you said, they're accustomed to working in a process. So if it's not there, they're going to create it, which is distracting them from selling. So build the process piece first, then plug the people into it. And the more experienced they are, the more comfortable they're going to be with the process as opposed to fighting it because they think that sales is all about relational activity. And sure, relational activity matters. We want people who know how to do that. But the best salespeople know how to blend relationship with very disciplined process so that they know how to predict, again, how much they're going to sell this month, how much they're going to make this month.
This is awesome. Thank you very much. We're at the end of our time. As we said, Steve, it goes fast. It's amazing how fast 15 minutes flies by. So real quick, just do a very high level who you are and how to get a hold of you.
I'm on LinkedIn, so Steve Caton, Caton is my last name. You can find me there. There's not a lot of Catons out there, so I'm pretty easy to find. And then AltezzaSolutions.com is our web address.
Thank you very much, Steve. Look forward to talking to you sometime in the future. Kevin, thank you. It's always great to have you on, Kevin. Happy selling.
What a valuable episode of Two Tall Guys Talking Sales. Today's discussion with Steve Caton offered a masterclass in knowing when and how to expand your sales organization using fractional salespeople. One especially insightful takeaway was how the team at Altezza caps hours at 60 per month for a single rep, not to limit productivity, but to spark competition and scalability by adding a second seller instead. It's a clever sales strategy rooted in both business acumen and team dynamics, showing that growth isn't about adding pressure, it's about adding structure. We also heard a critical reminder about the power of leading indicators. Instead of waiting for revenue results to determine if your team is ready to grow, Steve recommends watching the inputs, calls made, meetings booked, and proposals sent. That insight is your significant actionable item. Start tracking those metrics this week and use them to make proactive decisions that drive revenue generation before pipeline problems appear. If this conversation sparked ideas or left you with questions, don't hesitate to reach out to Sean or Kevin. Their contact info is in the show notes, along with a quick self-assessment tool to see how your current sales management practices stack up. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss the next episode filled with practical insights and proven sales processes. Until next Tuesday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time, happy selling.